Hey everybody, we're back with Oquendo. Different link. See if the audio's working better. We had some technical problems back there. Let's see if it's all straightened out. Let's hope so. What's up, Matt?
How's it going?
All good.
Hey Matt, so before before we cut the conversation, we were talking about Scorsese, psychological movies, and how the coronavirus might affect the the future of filmmaking. So
Yeah,
let's take a little bit. Let's pick up on that.
kind of forgot what I said.
That's okay. So it's just a conversation. So uh, how are you gonna make films if you can't have a crew?
Oh yeah. I think I had made the decision. I think I had mentioned I had made the decision to just cancel shooting for this entire year. And I think, like many filmmakers, you're probably just going to go back to writing. Um, but I think I had mentioned also there are, those kinds of films that can be made in just one setting. Like a good example I bring up Hitchcock's Lifeboat, or you guys ever seen Alfred Hitchcock's Rope? It's just all in like, one apartment, and that could be interesting. I mean, a lot of movies tend to not do that anymore. I think a lot of movies, like, you usually get them every few years, but they only take place in one setting. I think the last one I saw was, was it Locke, where it was with Tom Hardy, where he's in that car. And
I haven't
you guys
seen
hear me?
Luck. I haven't seen Luck. I
Huh?
remember the last movie I saw that kind of had like that controlled space and only like two actors was The Lighthouse.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it had like all over the place, right? Wasn't there like other
But it,
parts of the
yeah,
island they
it's
shot
like
in?
an island, but it's just like two characters and
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
You
Yeah,
could probably make a movie like that, just like two actors. You're a great photographer, so you're a one man crew, so you could do that and just hire two actors. Like test them for coronavirus, keep costs down, and just
yeah, right.
make a great movie like The Lighthouse. I liked it. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, they had a lot of interesting dialogue. I think I had seen his other film, I think The Witch, and he had written in that old English style, but it's completely outdated now. But you gotta admire the guy for writing in that, kind of keeping a dead language
Yeah,
alive,
it's like
and
watching
more importantly, keeping on movies.
like a sci-fi or a fantasy film, just like that dialogue that you can't understand right away, but it seems familiar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, it took me a while to start understanding. I didn't understand anything they were saying until like a couple of minutes in.
yeah. I remember Willem Dafoe was really good in it. I really liked his. He has like a monologue where he's like, well, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but things don't go well for him.
I think you spoiled it.
Yeah, I guess I did.
No, it's still a very enjoyable movie to watch. But yeah, I was talking with my brother like what would be like different protocols that would come into place for like filming from here on, Like obviously you'd have to like, take people's temperature when they go on set. Maybe like
Yeah,
pre-production phase would be like a quarantine. So you have the people locked up in a space for like 2 weeks just so
before the
before the
movie
movie
starts
starts filming,
filming.
just so you know that everyone's okay. And then you have like a completely closed off set just so no one comes in and can have problems with that, right?
Shoot
Yeah,
everything in 2 weeks tops. So 2 weeks of quarantine, 2 weeks of shooting, and then everybody goes home, and the editors are always in quarantine, even before the virus.
yeah. That makes me think of The Shining. I feel like that was probably the best quarantine film. I mean, one, it's a Stanley Kubrick movie, but it's also probably a movie that everybody was living on the set.
There's a
But that was more like
Spanish
3 months,
film,
right?
like a zombie type film called Quarentena, Quarantine.
Oh yeah. It came out like 10 years ago, right?
zombie flick, and they're like all trapped in
But I
a
think
building.
Matt's saying more that the actual filming of The Shining, everyone was like locked up in the studios, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a funny behind the scenes on the Blu-ray where Jack Nicholson's like in the actual like. I guess he's in a hotel adjacent to the set, but it looked like he was staying at one of the hotels in the
Yeah.
Overlook.
I guess that's a possibility for.
I mean, that's
What about
that's a great
chroma?
movie. I love it.
Just like, have you considered doing something with chroma?
No, I mean, I'm not really. I don't understand it as well as some other people, so I haven't considered it. No.
You like more like photography based films.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like what you're interested in. I like movies that are in like the actual place, which is I think I said it when I liked The Dark Knight. I loved how when he shot in The Dark Knight, he went to Hong Kong and shot there. It wasn't like this plate that he sent a second unit to go over there. He actually went to Hong Kong, and you see that in a lot of his work. And I'm really excited. Hopefully that we can go back to the theaters and watch his new movie Tenet, which I'm pretty excited for.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of movies that I wanted to see in theaters, and now that's kind of looking like farther away each day. You miss
Oh
going to the
yeah,
movies?
was it the Bond movie?
Do you miss going to the movies, Matt?
Yeah, but definitely, man. That's what I was actually thinking about. I wrote in my notes here. You kind of wonder if this is like a big nail in the coffin for like the movie going experience. I mean, is it? Do you think?
Well, I think my brother was saying about drive-in movies that might come back.
Yeah, that'd be
That might come
great.
back, and it's
And there's actually a few drive-ins left in
Are they
LA
working
County.
right now, or are they closed?
For some reason, they closed. I think because a lot of people were acting stupid, and a lot of people, at least the drive-ins I know about. Some people just go there to have some fun. Not really there to see the
'Cause
movie.
that could be a real game changer for drive-in movies. Uh, People still missing going out, buying popcorn. Right now, like the person who will sell you popcorn would be in a hazmat suit, but you can just park and put the radio to the station that
So
the
the
purchase
frequency.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
You should go to the drive-in in Bassett. It's It's kind of like off the 605 and 60, and that one's huge. Like when you look at it, it's like a real drive-in. Like I think the biggest problem with drive-ins in LA County is that the space, especially in more denser areas, they're probably not going to have like the real drive-ins where they probably only can fit 15 cars. As opposed to like this one in Bassett, it fits like 60 cars, maybe more.
if
And there's four screens.
if I had
in
a
one.
parking lot, that's what I would do. Just like put a screen.
Yeah.
Just park your cars. It would have to be like a open space parking lot, not like the different level parking lot, but just like out in the open
Yeah.
and start. Like we should sell that idea to AMC and those guys.
you just start buying up
I think the problem is
land
this-
in the desert, right?
Yeah. It's also like a seasonal thing too, because days are longer. You can only get like maybe 2 showings a day, as opposed to like a theater where you can get like 8 of them.
that's true.
But it would be interesting though. I'm sure that's something that I'm sure everyone wants to go back to. I love drive-ins; they're fun. I actually Temo and Stan for a short film that we did last year.
Yeah. How old is that drive-in where you shot that?
It's got to be over like 30 something years, 30, 40 years.
Wow. And they have what type of projector? Do you know?
It used to be a film projector, but I think they switched to like just a
Yeah.
digital one. But they were showing like, once at the time, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, and like I think the new Spider-Man. So they're playing movies that are not old films. They're playing like really current films, but they only show 2 movies a day or 3 movies a
Yeah, even
day.
the summer is probably worse, right?
Yeah, it's probably there's only like 9 o'clock and a 11 o'clock
Yeah.
showing. But the thing is, you go to a drive-in in the summer, you see a lot of rowdy teenagers, and you see a lot of. I mean, a lot of people go to the drive-in not really for the movie. They go for, other things. Maybe it's cheaper than a
That's
motel.
And safer than the parking lot.
Safer than a parking lot, cheaper than a motel, discounted prices.
You could catch part of a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how do you think the baby boomers got started, right?
That's true. So it's like a Netflix and chill outdoors.
Yeah, it's method movie going. That's what I would call it. But yeah, but going back to that, it is a question. I always wonder if like after this is all over, like when people go back to the movies, I'm sure there's going to be like a 3-seat rule, right? I'm sure they're not going to be going. Okay, well, everyone can sit next to each other.
According to Bill Gates, this is just like pandemic number 1. There's gonna be more pandemics, so I think maybe I don't know, designed by him, but talking seriously, maybe there's like some
enough.
pandemics in the future will get worse and worse.
Jeez, man.
I think a good solution is drive-ins, drive-through, drive-ins.
Yeah. But then that begs the question. It's like, what happens to the movies that Martin Scorsese was talking about? Those movies that are very small, low, but not too low budget, but low budget enough that they wouldn't find a distributor for a drive-in. Like, does that go straight to streaming? And it kind of begs the question, like, what does that mean for filmmakers who want to make movies that are not tentpole movies? Do you make movies for your cell phone? Do you make movies?
All filmmakers want to see their film on the big screen. That's like a dream.
Yeah, I totally agree.
What do you think will happen to like film festivals? That's like another thing.
Drive-in film festivals.
Or just all going online. I saw that Amazon recently has like the South by Southwest lineup.
Yeah.
Now if you go on Amazon Prime, you'll see like they have several movies that they had selected for their film festival.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to pay to see it, or
I think they probably made a deal with Amazon. I haven't seen any yet. I just saw yesterday that the suggestions it showed up like South by Southwest, and then had like a bunch of different films available.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
But still, it's like there's very few people have like an in-home theater, so
Yeah.
it's
Oh, I
it's hard
bet.
to like emulate that experience of being immersed in the screen and have like the audio blast at you from everywhere. So that's
No, I
gonna
agree.
be a tough change for a lot of film goers.
It's also in terms of the way we experience movies. Like, a lot of people who watch movies nowadays are watching on their phone. Most people are going to start filming things really close. There's going to be a lot of like close-ups, a lot of floating heads when you see movies, as opposed to like back in the 50s and 60s and CinemaScope, where you'll see like the wide shots. It was really a wide shot. It would be a shot from miles away. It changes a lot of how people will approach filming a scene.
I
If
think
they know that it's going to be seen on a very small screen.
yeah, maybe it might be also give a boost to films like Tangerine, where everything's like shot with an iPhone, just like like this one guy shooting stuff,
Yeah.
rehearses with the actors pretty well. The cast is kind of like reduced, but I'm guessing you could probably watch Tangerine on your iPhone. Distribution would be online.
Right. But that seems like a movie that would make sense to see it on your
Yeah,
phone, right?
it's shot on with an iPhone. You should see it on your iPhone.
Yeah. It's another good movie. Speaking of iPhone, I really liked Steven Soderbergh's movie Unsane. Did you guys get a
Haven't
chance to
seen
see that? It's pretty good. It's all filmed on an iPhone, but it's like really well done. Like he kind of shows you that it doesn't matter the medium, but if you know the form language of a wide shot versus a close up, and you could still make a pretty good movie. And I thought he did a pretty good job with the iPhone on that one.
I'll check that one out. Insane. That was like
Yeah.
2 years ago, right? Maybe.
I think so, yeah. 2018, 2019, something like that. It's pretty cool because it's also set in one location for the most part. And like you see Soderbergh, he just has like a little like handy cam with the iPhone, and he's sitting on a wheelchair, and people are just wheeling him. Like it's really bare bones kind of filmmaking, which to me that's really impressive, especially since he's made like Oscar nominated films, big tentpole, $100 million
yeah,
movies,
it's huge movies with amazing budgets.
major budgets, and to do something like that, I'm really impressed by that. Speaking of which, I guess we should segue to Contagion, right?
Contagion, yeah.
Yeah, he did that. He made that movie like 10 years ago, and now we're kind of living in it in a way.
Contagion is by Soderbergh. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's by
I haven't
Soderbergh.
seen that one.
He did that one, and he also did Side Effects. He did that like 2 in 1 year. It's really incredible. He's actually another filmmaker I really admire.
But we're gonna get back to Scorsese. I know we went a little bit Soderbergh with
sure.
this, but like for example, what would you think Scorsese would do with an iPhone? You think he would ever?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think if he just didn't have a choice, I don't know if he would take you up on it, but I think he would go back to his roots. Like if you look at his first movies, like Who's That Knocking on My Door and Mean Streets, and even to an extent like Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, he made like a lot of these like almost very chamber films where there was like not too many characters. It was a lot of people just talking in urban settings, and I think he would kind of resort back to those kinds of movies, because it seems like now he's at the stage in his career where he's making these epic films with huge budgets, big stars. But I think if he were to just give him an iPhone, I think he would go back to his roots as a filmmaker. His early stuff is really good too. It reminded me a lot of like, you could tell he was really influenced by the French New Wave and John Cassavetes.
So maybe it'd be a time to like go back to his roots. That'd be interesting. I mean, an iPhone was just like a saying. I mean, I guess you could still shoot on different cameras, but yeah, I think that would be all what we're talking about, just like cutting down on production team and going bare bones might be the way to go from now on. Who knows? We don't know yet, but
Yeah, basically, just get 2-3 actors tops for the cast. Get a good solid script, something you can shoot the whole thing in 2 weeks, and have a pre-production 2 weeks before where everybody's quarantined. And nobody can leave. You have to have the food ready. It's like everybody's off grid until you do the whole pre and all the shoot.
Yeah. But do you think that's going to last? Do you think it's going to be from now on, or is it just going to be something the next year
I think
or so?
If somebody wants to shoot something this year, they would have to do something like that, and then wait and see how long it takes for the vaccine to be ready, because it's at least a year. And maybe this is just how Bill Gates put it. This is just pandemic number 1. Maybe there's more pandemics that are going to be even harder and more contagious.
I need to see that, actually. I haven't. It's kind of crazy that it came out in January, right? When sort of this was happening.
Came out.
yeah, but he was talking about it like last year, right?
2019. No, what he said.
Or no, years ago. He was
Years ago,
talking about
like,
years ago.
4 years ago, he was talking about like pandemics, but he was in an interview with Stephen Colbert, and he was just like, like, haha, he relaxed, and talking about the future of pandemics, and he also suggested, Bill Gates suggesting that there might be like biological wars in the future because look how they paralyzed an economy.
Yeah.
So, talking with one of the previous guests we had, he said this is something you can do in a laboratory, but we're not saying that it came from a laboratory. We don't
Yeah.
want to talk about
Yeah.
conspiracies, but in the future, something like this could be used as a weapon.
Yeah, definitely. Which is actually very, very frightening because we didn't really get hit as much as California didn't get hit as bad as New York City or New York in general. So we're only seeing like a half a percentage of what we would have normally seen if we lived in a really dense area.
Yeah, or if also like stay-at-home measures would have been taken like a later date, it might have been worse. Also,
Yeah, no, that too.
I think there's like fast action there from authorities.
I think this is the one time we're actually thankful LA is a car centric
Yeah, it's like
area
spread out.
versus kind of like
It's an advantage.
New York City where everyone has to do it.
It's an advantage if you compare to how the virus spread out faster in New York.
Yeah.
So, what do you think Scorsese's thinking right now?
Well, it's funny because
You know where he lives?
No, I don't. No, I don't. But I wish I did. But I know he's working on another movie, and it's interesting because he was working on a western, his first western film, which I was really excited to hear about. And it has Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Nice.
In it. And he was out in like Oklahoma, Kansas, like scouting at the last, like I think about a month before this all went down. So I'm sure he's probably just storyboarding, waiting for this to happen. But I did hear in the papers, or not the papers, Google, like he's having trouble with the funding of it again, just like he did with The Irishman. And that's kind of strange when you think about like Martin Scorsese is making a big western. People are unsure if that would make money or give a return in the box office, especially a movie that has Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro in it.
Two of the biggest stars of all time, and you can't sell it.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and that's a bit. I think that's what kind of scares. Really. I mean, I'm a small independent film. It's scary when you hear stories like that because it's like, if it's always going to be an uphill battle regardless of where you are on the feeding range of filmmakers.
So, why don't you like adapt a comic book movie? If you were to adapt a comic movie, which one would you direct?
I think the ones that I wanted to make were probably already made. I would have wanted to do. There's a video game that I actually thought would make a great movie, Max Payne. But I think they already made it.
Yeah, I think they made it's like Mark Wahlberg or something, maybe.
Yeah, they made it. They made that one. I'm not going to say what I thought about it.
That's okay. Your silence says everything.
But I thought that would have been a really good film. And if anything, I thought that would have been a great movie. Like if you paired that with someone like Martin Scorsese, I think that would have been a pretty interesting movie.
Definitely. What about it?
I don't know if is that a comic book?
It's a video game.
It's a video game, yeah.
It's
I
like
remember the video game.
Cutaways are really comic.
What's John Wick? Is that a original script or it seems like it's based on a comic book because like the world is really developed.
Let's see. I mean, he's definitely a comic book character because he's like invincible. There's no way he can die.
And I love that he's just like seeking revenge for his dog.
Yeah, it's a very straightforward movie. I like it because I like it because he does
Yeah.
judo in that. And when I started learning judo and I'm looking at doing it, it's pretty cool when you see like you can actually recognize the moves that he's doing,
Awesome.
and he's doing that in accordance to guns. And it's almost like a very, without sounding kind of pretentious, it's really artistic the way they did it. Like it's almost like a ballet of martial arts and um, you know gun.
They use real stunts, right? Like no chroma.
No, they use chroma actually. Believe it or not, some of the scenes are really well done. In John Wick 3, there's a motorcycle chase scene, and that was all in a
Oh,
green screen.
okay. I thought that was like for real. It looked
No, it's insane.
Yeah, it's really very well choreographed. All the fight scenes are like you
Yeah.
can tell they rehearsed them very well. Also because they're almost all like continuous shots, right? Not like
Yeah,
chopped
they
up.
try not to
Yeah,
cut too
yeah.
much. See, that's what I can expect. I love big movies just as much as anyone. Like, if they can make a movie like that where they're trying something new, like I haven't seen action like that before in a movie on this scale. I think the closest thing I've seen is maybe The Raid. It came out maybe 10 years ago, and I like it when like old ideas are explored in a new way, and that to me is what like I think if a lot of comic book movies had approached that the way Christopher Nolan approached The Dark Knight, I would definitely be like first in line to see every single one. In fact, I've probably seen the majority of the comic book movies that come out, but I don't see that a lot where they're taking a chance and trying something new and like kind of reinventing a genre or reinventing an old trope.
You do say that like old ideas in a new way, but like for example, getting back to Scorsese, what is it about him that you particularly enjoy and like about his film style?
It's funny because let me go to my notes real quick. I mean, I think he's not only a filmmaker, but he's a historian. He's a student. He has his own film foundation where he's restored over 850 movies. And these movies aren't. I don't think any of us have even heard of them. Like he's restored films from all the way from 1899 to today. And these are movies that a lot of like as you know, a lot of the silent films were destroyed during World War One. But he's taking the time and obviously money to restore movies that, let's face it, most people in my generation and generations after us will probably not watch. I just saw recently they restored a French movie from 1915, and I don't even want to know how many people actually want like paid to see that movie, you know. So I love that as a filmmaker, he's not only thinking about restoring the past of movies, but kind of laying the foundations for future filmmakers to look at movies and make sure that we don't forget where we came from as filmmakers, because the language of movies have changed, dramatically in the last 20 years. Like, if you look at YouTube, if you look at the average seconds YouTube videos are cutting, it's like 1 second, sometimes not even a full second, and they're cutting immediately to what's going on. And I think it has to do with our attention spans are like getting shorter and shorter. And you got to think of like movies from that standpoint. Like, how are we going to look at movies from the year 2100? How are we going to look at movies from the year 2200 or the year 3000? And I think people like Martin Scorsese, and there are other directors like him too, are making sure that movies stay relevant, but also films that should be seen and should stay important in the history and in the art form are still relevant because of his foundation. It's kind of like, it's like that old thing. It's like when you're studying English literature or wanting to be a writer, the first guy that you always see is Shakespeare, right? Well, who are the people that preserved his work? Those people should be definitely given the credit, because if people didn't preserve Shakespeare's work, or the work of Homer, or all these great writers from the ancient Greece and even before that, where would those teachings be now? Look, I think that's why I think Martin Scorsese is great that he's doing that, but he's also a film director and a great director at that. And if you look at like the kinds of movies he's made, you could tell that he's constantly getting better, but also like he's taking lessons from films even later in his career. Like his last movie was before the Irishman was Silence, and I think we all saw it. And it's a terrific movie, correct?
Yeah.
And I think as a filmmaker, that's all you can really expect, is to constantly learning about movies and seeing how far you can take movies before the next generation comes and takes the baton from your hand. And I think, Martin Scorsese that's just like a small piece of why I think he's an incredible, not only figure for film, but figure for the humanities, for the arts. I think we need more people like Martin Scorsese, because without him, we probably wouldn't remember a lot of these films that most of us would otherwise forget.
I mean, I definitely agree with you that Martin Scorsese is a amazing filmmaker. I'm not gonna say he's not, and I enjoy his films very much. I enjoyed all of them.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to see The Irishman in theaters, but I don't know. I saw Irishman in theaters once, and I felt like I could watch it maybe once more, or something like that. But I don't know. It wasn't.
How many times have you seen The Irishman, man?
Oh, I'm embarrassed to answer this
I
question.
know you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be.
At this point, in May 4th, I've probably seen it over 20 times.
That's amazing.
And I've seen it 5 times in theaters, and one of them was with you
You saw it
guys,
5
actually.
times in theaters, and
Yeah.
in your room like another 15 times.
Yeah, and I watch it in the morning sometimes, just to get like a little bit of fire, because sometimes you're not excited with the movies that come out, and sometimes, at least for me, that's where I look at it.
What type of details do you look for when you rewatch over and over his films?
I look at editing, and I think that obviously he gets a major credit for setting up the shots and the overall like structure of the scenes, but Stelma Schoonmaker, his editor since I think Raging Bull, she deserves a lot of the credit, because the movie takes place from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and I think it goes and ends in 2002. And I think to kind of create like a rhythm, a structure to this entire movie, and also, kind of cover all those decades, it's pretty incredible. And it feels, to me, it felt very seamless.
You think it's?
So I guess to answer the question, I love the editing in these movies, and the cinematography, obviously.
Is this your favorite Scorsese movie? Do you think?
It's a tough one.
The Irishman, is it in the top 3?
It's in the top 3, yeah. I think the movie that made me want to make movies would probably be Taxi Driver. I remember when I was a teenager, I saw that 17 times, and I was just obsessed with the movie. And it was probably the first movie that showed me that like movies weren't just like, it wasn't just like The Mask. I like The Mask. I think it's a really cool movie, but like at the time, when you're a kid, you always think, oh, that's what movies are. They're just there to entertain us and make sure we escape our boring life. But when I saw Taxi Driver, I thought, oh wow, that's incredible. I didn't know movies were capable of showcasing, humanistic emotions like that. Like you really felt the pain of the main character in that movie, and I thought that's the movie that kind of I go back to a lot too.
So, Taxi Driver, Irishman, top 3.
Ooh,
What's the third one?
you're gonna make me pick.
This is a tough question. I don't know.
Tough question. I really want to pick. It's either between Casino, which I really like, but I also really like. He made a small film in the '80s called After Hours, and it's like this New York. It's actually a very good quarantine movie because it takes place over the course of one night, and it has the same characters. And he did it super low budget. Like I think he did it in less than a month. But it's like this low budget Kafkaesque '80s comedy in New York City, and I really like the filmmaking in that one. I actually wrote about it in one of my blog.
Um, where can we see your blog? Send us the link so we can put it on the information under the video.
Sure. I think I sent it to you via email, but if you want, I could send it to you again.
What about
I'll make note of
Goodfellas? I think that might be my favorite. Goodfellas.
Oh, that's a good one too. I mean, you're asking like asking me to pick three, and that's tough enough.
All right, so top 10. Top 10. Let's start from number 10.
Okay then. Okay, well let's do. I really liked. Okay, so we had The Irishman, Taxi Driver,
After Hours.
After Hours, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Casino. I actually really like Bringing Out the Dead.
Oh, that was
Nicolas
really good.
Cage.
Yeah. That's a really good movie.
That was really good. And they don't have for some reason, there's no Blu-ray on that. I still don't understand. And there's no Blu-ray for After Hours. And then I liked even his other films that are not like quote-unquote mob films. Like, I don't know why he's always labeled as a mob filmmaker. He's only made like, out of his 25 plus films, he's only made, I think 4 or 5 of them have been mob films. I like The Age of Innocence a lot, with Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer. Another great film I actually really liked. I like Gangs of New York. I think that's one of those movies I wish was actually longer. It's a movie that
Longer than almost
no one knows the story.
2 hours and a half.
And I feel like it was the last ending part, which should have been a bit longer. I think he was maybe forced to cut it by the studio or something. I don't know, because I felt like there was just so much more into that movie. Like Silence, I thought that was an incredible film, and even his that child picture he made, Hugo.
Hugo, yeah.
I thought that was a really good movie too. And then he made this really incredible short film. I wrote about this one too, called Life Lessons, and it was part of this portmanteau piece that he did with Francis Coppola and Woody Allen in 1989, called New York Stories. And each director contributed like a 30-minute short to create like a one feature about New York. And Martin Scorsese's one, it was called Life Lessons with Nick Nolte. That's one of my favorite short films I've ever seen. It's actually really well made, and like that idea that the long short film is dead. Like, how a lot of film festivals don't like movies over 15 minutes. This movie is like 45 minutes, and I wouldn't cut anything out of it, and I wouldn't add anything out of it. I think it's perfect. It's like exactly what a 45-minute short film should be.
Yeah, so that's the weird thing about short films, that they have like you're kind of pushed to keep them at a certain limit, just because of the way like programming works at film festivals, and it's like over 15, they can't fit it in, so it's like
it's no good.
But I mean, there's stories that just have to last what they last, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think back then, like maybe in the 80s and 90s, and even to the 2000s, we saw a lot of longer short films, like 30-minute, 40-minute films, and a lot of them actually worked. I don't think necessarily they need to be that short to begin with. I think our attention spans have gotten smaller, and maybe you can get more money when you have more films in a block than just 2 films,
Okay, I have another question on Scorsese. How does he work with writers that you know? Has he ever written anything himself, or does he hire writers, or what's that process?
I think his first film he did, Who's That Knocking on My Door, he wrote himself. Mean Streets, he wrote it with Mardik Martin, who passed away pretty recently, a few years ago. And I think Goodfellas, he wrote it with Nick Pileggi. And then I think in Silence, he co-wrote it. So he's definitely involved in the writing process. Probably not as much as like a Paul Thomas Anderson or a Quentin Tarantino. But I would say he's probably from beginning to end, analyzing every page because he has written films before.
And he's also an winning documentarian. He's done some documentaries that have won accolades.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
What do you know about his documentary work?
He's done. That's another like you could write one of those films and I haven't even seen all of his documentary work. One thing I did see was A Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese, and I think it's like a 5-hour documentary on I think not only American cinema but cinema all over the world, and all the movies that have influenced him. And that's why I think he's an important figure, because if you have a director as big as him talking about movies you never heard of, he keeps the memories of other filmmakers alive through his work. And I think that's a definitely noble thing that he's doing with his work as a documentarian, keeping kind of like history alive through cinema. And I think that's another reason why I like The Irishman a lot, because it focuses a lot on a big part of U.S. history that not many people were aware of, or people actually forgot about. I mean, he kind of points to it. The nurse doesn't even know who Jimmy Hoffa is, and it kind of plays into the theme of mortality and what has meaning as time goes on. And that's another reason why I think he's an important director, because he's definitely a historian at that.
Does he work well with comedy? I mean, he did the King of Comedy, and he has some funny lines and some interesting characters, but
it's funny. The King of Comedy is
it's
not that funny too.
It is funny, but
I thought The Irishman was funnier. I thought The Irishman was funny. I thought Goodfellas was funnier.
it is funnier.
Funny how?
Funny how?
Yeah, funny how? I think he does really well with comedy. I mean, a lot of his scenes, you could tell he used a lot of improvisations with the actors, and I think they've talked about it in interviews where they talk about working with Martin Scorsese, and he kind of lets them go. They're like a bull in a china shop. They just let them go in a scene. Have you seen Cape Fear, with Robert De Niro and Nick Nolte?
Yeah. The remake? Yeah, it's a really good movie.
That he did. Yeah, it's
with,
good, and it's funny because the more you see it, the more I actually think it's a really comical movie, and not in a bad way. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I think the lines and Robert De Niro's southern accent, it always cracks me up when I see it.
I'm trying to think of the actress. I forgot.
Juliette Lewis.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. It's funny. Fun fact: from when I read, apparently Steven Spielberg had asked Martin Scorsese to direct Schindler's List, and Steven Spielberg was supposed to direct Cape Fear, but Martin Scorsese said, I don't feel comfortable directing a Holocaust movie, so they switched. And that's why Steven Spielberg directed Schindler's List and Scorsese did Cape Fear. At least that's what the internet tells me.
Really? That's interesting. I didn't...
And you kind of wonder what Martin Scorsese would have done with the Holocaust. But I think Steven Spielberg did an incredible job with Schindler's List.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine Scorsese's Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Yeah, the internet, it's like a home of a lot of what ifs for movies.
Yeah. I wanted to see Sergio Leone's Stalingrad. I heard it. Because when he did Once Upon a Time in America, which I've been obsessed with that movie the last year, he had been playing this like 6-hour epic movie about the Bolsheviks in Russia, and you kind of wonder what movies you wish you could have seen in an alternate universe, or if Kubrick hadn't died before Eyes Wide Shut was released, what would have been his next film?
Well, he wanted to do AI, right?
Yeah, I heard he wanted, and that would have been incredible because it would have came out in 2001, right?
I mean, the The Steven Spielberg version I liked also, but Kubrick would have been something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
It would have probably been something different in the hands of Kubrick or something. And you also think like, what would directors like Kubrick or Orson Welles do with today's technology? You know, I feel like they're always pushing the bar during their own era, but you kind of wonder what they would have done with RE cams and DSLRs and these phantom cameras. I'm sure those are the things that you think of as like, what if Alfred Hitchcock was alive? What would he have done with the technology we had today?
We're gonna have to clone him, bring him back. It'd be amazing, like just like amazing films with Hitchcock.
Right. But do you think they would be excited to be in the state of movies? Would they be like, what is this Netflix? Why aren't people going to the theaters and see their movies? Or do you think they would be?
I think they would find it like, oh, it's a travesty. We can't project it.
I think if you like grab them from their point in time and drop them here, then they'd probably react like that. But if they were like lived up to this moment, maybe they'd kind of like understand. They wouldn't be happy probably, but
it would be a slow burn. They start adapting to like projecting on a screen or drive-in theaters. They would probably.
I think Orson Welles would be really excited if he was alive. I think he'd be extremely like ecstatic to work in this.
Orson Welles' last movie was pretty groundbreaking. Have you seen that one? It was on Netflix.
The Spirit in the Wind or something.
Yeah, it's weird. It felt like he wanted to do something like a reality type behind the scenes movie, where it's like a making.
Well, it's kind of like movies now, right?
It's like a film about film.
Yeah, like Fellini, right? Fellini's 8.5. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Orson Welles would love to have made movies now. I'm not sure how other filmmakers would, like. I don't know how John Ford would feel about like moving to digital.
I have a problem with westerns in the digital era. I think westerns, the look, it needs to be on film.
Yeah, I agree. It feels so flat. It feels like. I think with westerns, they have this sort of like tangible feel when you watch them. Well, like when you see high definition movies, it feels like it doesn't feel like you're in the time period. I can't imagine watching The Searchers if someone redid it and shot it on a DSLR. It'd be kind of strange.
I think sci-fi works well with digital, but westerns and period pieces, like they just like take me out of the reality they're trying to construct.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It has to be like really well done. I don't like 4K sometimes just feels too real.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly a big believer on the more pixels we have, the better. I think we've gotten to a point where it's clear. You see the pores on people's faces. I'm more interested in like the things that you can do with the image as opposed to whether or not there's more pixels in the frame.
There are different choices because the hyper realistic thing that you get with HD 4K cameras where you see the pores, that takes you out of the mood. And sometimes you like painters, impressionists, they can create like, beautiful images with just like hinting silhouettes and different type of colors.
Yeah. Like German expressionists, that kind of stuff. Is that what you're saying?
So what do you recommend when you have like something artistic you want to make, but you have a digital camera? What would you do?
It's funny because I've been writing this script that I was thinking about things you guys were saying, how what can you do with probably less than 5, 10 people? And I mean, sorry, is your question like what kind of camera I would use, or is it more like
Yeah, wait.
how do you like
Starting with the
something?
camera, but also like the post production process. What type of things would you do?
I mean, you guys seen my Bolex, my digital Bolex. I really like the look of that camera. I really like how it has that feeling of like that 16 millimeter. It feels like you're also like a different world versus like when you shoot something on a DSLR or even an iPhone or something. Like it feels like the world we all exhibit. So I think if I were to I think I would want to shoot something that seems more out of touch with reality as opposed to something that is reality. So I would look at maybe shooting movies, something with a lot of textures, a lot of very colorful. Um, I don't know. It's hard to explain without having an example, but I would try to make it look as far as reality would make it look. For instance, like if you stuck a webcam and you put it side by side with the camera that I'd want to use, I'd want it to make it look as far removed from that reality that we're normally associating with high definition versus the reality of something like a movie. And I don't know whether that's from like shooting a lot of movies in darkness. Like I guess a good example is like I really like Gordon Willis's the cinematographer called Gordon Willis. He's shot some of the most amazing films I've ever seen. Obviously, his most famous one is The Godfather, Godfather 1 and 2. But when you watch his movies, like you think of, like I think if anyone was in film school and they had a light meter, they would be like, this is completely breaking the rules because there are some scenes in The Godfather where there's just like only a hint of the main actors on screen, and arguably you have the biggest actor of all time, Marlon Brando, in your movie, and you barely see half his face. And I think that's the kind of it's hard for me to explain, but I think that's the kind of images that I would be interested in trying to reproduce. The sort of like I don't know. I feel like I'm stumbling
No,
through
no,
this
it's good.
question.
I'm creating an image in my mind, like playing with the light. Like trying to suggest more silhouettes or more contrast, or just like
Yeah, make it look as far removed from the reality you would have if you were to just take out your phone and then just record it. Because everything looks like perfect now. When you record something, it looks exactly almost the way you see it. So what is interesting is shooting something the way you would normally see it um, on your camera.
yeah, just like trying to create a different sense of reality.
Just like
Yeah, yeah,
how we
yeah.
perceive things, right? Just like different perception of how things are seen.
So you would have to play with
Yeah.
the mood, the colors, just like to generate like a different language, because colors, they also translate into different meanings, right?
Yeah, I guess a good example would be like, let's say you have someone break into, let's say you have a burglar who breaks into, he steals things, and then he kills the owner of the house. But like you never see the burglar. The burglar
The
is
Irishman.
completely in the shadows, or he's completely in the shadows. You only see like the after effects. Like you see his footsteps, you see a close up of his hands pulling on that person's neck, but you never see the hint that there is a burglar. You don't even know if it's a human being. You just see parts of it, and that's the kind of surreality that I would sort of look at in movies and think, oh, that's interesting. You wouldn't normally. Most people like to focus on the violence, but what do you focus on is things that surround the violence, like the broken mirror or the broken glass. Um, yeah.
So what do you think about when you see a Scorsese film and you're going over the dialogues? How does uh, how does that affect your writing?
That's a good question, actually. I think when I look at that, I think what you write isn't necessarily what you end up seeing on screen. I think that's the basic takeaway what I see in a movie. I think so much of script writing is literally writing through filming, writing through the editing, even writing through the sound mix. So I think what keeps me focused as a writer is not to be focused on writing the perfect script, because like I don't think I necessarily have the talent to write the perfect script, but I know that what ends up in the final movie isn't ever going to be what I ended up writing in the first place. So I think writing to the very end of it's a stage that follows every stage of filmmaking, I think.
Which, who's the biggest influence in your writing? Is it Scorsese or other filmmakers that might be more of an influence when you write?
Um, there's a lot of directors I like to hear the dialogue. You know, it sounds really weird, but I really like. I read a lot of Ernest Hemingway stuff, and I like the way he sort of when he writes things. I know there's a lot of run-on sentences in his writing, but he keeps it in a very bare minimal. So, like for instance, he'll write something like, "The woman came and dropped a pencil on the floor." That's it. He won't be really descriptive of his writing. He won't say, "Oh, she wore a red dress. She took 5 steps." He makes it very. The writing seems very naked, and I love how. That's in terms of descriptions. I love that kind of writing. I also like, in terms of dialogue, I like David Mamet's stuff. There's a really. He's made a lot of great movies and plays. I've seen probably more movies than his plays, but he did The House of Games, Glenn Ross. So he also did this other movie called The Spanish Prisoner I really liked. And the writing, it's very stylized. You know, it doesn't feel like the kind of dialogue that you have with people. For instance, like if you and I were talking at the bar, there's going to be a lot of, yeah, okay. The writing doesn't sound like people who talks like this. I think that's another version of reality that you see in the movies versus what you would see in reality. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, David Mamet, and who's the first one?
Hemingway.
Hemingway. Definitely. Hemingway's the type of writer that's from that generation. They were very just like direct.
Like he has his report. It's like he started off as a reporter, so that's why his writing, it feels like you're reading a newspaper article sometimes. Oh, and Woody Allen too, of course. I love his writing. It's terrific.
Can we talk about Woody Allen?
Yeah, it's funny that you mention it because I just got his autobiography. It doesn't even show up.
Blurred apropos of nothing. Ah, yeah.
This is autobiography.
Yeah. He's probably
It's
defending
pretty so
himself
far,
from the Me Too movement.
I'd rather not talk about those. It's funny though because I haven't got to it yet, but he does talk about whatever he was going through in that time, and it's interesting to hear both sides. I'm not saying what he did was, I don't want to talk about what he did, but I know that one of his children is defending him, and one of his I believe is a
he
therapist
became a
too.
therapist,
So
and he's on Woody Allen's side, and he was older when the child rape allegations came out than the two kids that are on Mia Farrow's side.
yeah.
So he makes a really great case for Woody Allen and why he might be innocent. It's hard to make a decision, but I think after reading both sides, I believe Woody Allen.
Interesting, yeah. I don't know enough about it. All I know is from what you get in the media, and like as we were talking about, sometimes you really can't trust the media. You don't know exactly what is true sometimes, especially something as sensitive as this. It seems more like a family affair.
Yeah, it's a family affair that it's relevant because he's such a icon for like filmmakers. For he's a culture icon. Everybody knows who he is. Like from older
Yeah.
generations to the newer generations, and his films. He makes a film a year, so he always stays relevant, and
Yeah.
that's why he's news.
No, no, I agree. And he writes all his
Yeah.
movies too, and some of his movies they kind of overlap in things he's talked about, but I admire that he explores philosophical ideas in every day in all his movies.
So Woody Allen, as a writer, what influences your writing?
There's a movie he did called Match Point. I really
Oh,
enjoyed
that
that
was
one.
great. Yeah,
It's really good, and it's funny because he almost redid that movie from a 1989 film he did called Crimes and
yeah,
Misdemeanors, where he starred in it. Have you guys
Yeah,
heard of
yeah.
that one? Yeah, yeah, and it dealt with a man. It was actually two stories. It was funny. It was one was a comedy, and then the other was a serious film. And the serious portion of the movie was a man who decides his mistress. And I was intrigued by he was able to take like the philosophy of luck and the philosophy of chance and kind of merge that idea into like a murder mystery. And in the end, in like the final act of Match Point, it turns into like an ethical, moral, um, like a morality play,
yeah,
where he's wondering if you know, he will definitely have to pay for it somehow.
yeah.
But I thought it was really some of the best writing.
I think that might
Kind
be
of
one of
seen.
his best films. His one of his best
Yeah,
scripts.
yeah, yeah.
Match Point. I think it.
It's funny. That's one of his best movies, and they're not even comedies.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
like a
serious,
serious
totally
movie. There's nothing
serious.
funny.
It's suspense. I think Alfred Hitchcock would be proud of that film if he would make it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a suspense and it's like
Totally.
moral tribulations. It's really interesting. I think it might be one of his best films. One of my favorite, at least.
Yeah, and I think it's one of his only films that has original score. I think, right? Oh no, no, that was Cassandra's Dream. Actually, he did a movie called Cassandra's Dream a few years later. It wasn't as good as Match Point, but it was still pretty interesting. He was kind of moving to territory like he's just making very dramatic films, which I thought was kind of cool.
Okay, so we have a question from a viewer in Colombia, and he's asking if what do you think about movies? Have you seen any films from that area, from Colombia, cinema,
Colombia or Latin America.
or Latin America?
Oh, it's funny. We never talked about this. Girl. I saw Monos
Oh, yeah?
a while ago.
What do you think?
Monos, yeah, it was good. That's another film. I'm curious if you could make that during quarantine because they shot this all, out in the open, right? I think if everybody was sort of like as you said, quarantined, I thought the Monos thought it was really terrifically
It
made.
kind of feels like they were quarantined, right? You get that vibe that they're like camping
Yeah,
out
they probably were.
in the mountain or something.
They have a hostage.
I wish Yeah, I wanted to talk to you guys about that because I'm sure there was a lot of political undertones that I didn't completely understand growing up here in the U.S. But I'm sure there's definitely more to like. It was sort of an allegory for like little governments that are growing in Latin America, or
I think it's mostly just like showing children in the war and how that still happens in Colombia.
okay,
Recently,
because I wasn't even sure they didn't even say that they're in Colombia, right? Don't they
No,
just say they're in this? Just know they're in this
yeah,
world
it's
and everyone speaks.
it feels like sci-fi because they don't mention where they are, so it could be like sometime in the future, sometime in the past. They don't mention
Yeah,
like where they are, in terms of a country or time, but it feels familiar for Colombians because it's it's something that occurs in the conflict, the ongoing conflict where the children are recruited as soldiers. And just last year there was a tragedy where some underage kids were recruited by the guerrilla, and the
Yeah.
government just bombed and killed them, the like a camp. And so it was controversy in the sense that the government, instead of trying to rescue these kids from the guerrilla, they just like thought of them as the enemy. So it's something that's still ongoing, but
Sorry, my dog just opened the fridge.
It's good. All good.
I don't know.
what
I'm
are
wearing
you
shorts.
feeding him?
Oh, no,
It's a
I don't
smart
know
dog,
how he
man.
opened it.
He's gonna go for that again, yeah.
No, no, no. But did it take a point of view of? Because I wasn't really sure. Was it taking a point of view of the government that these little, guerrilla tribes are bad, or was it taking like a neutral position? Because at the end, remember, she's saved by, I guess, this unknown government.
Well, yeah,
Well,
we don't really see
team.
what ends up happening with her. It's just like she just gets out of that situation. But it's more like how I saw it. It was more like just like kids forced into like adulthood or like adult situations,
Right.
but they're still kids in the end, right? And they still have like a very immature attitude toward these very adult things that they have to live through.
Yeah.
Okay, spoiler alert. At the end of Monos, when the girl is rescued, so the government in Colombia, it's very corrupt, and the army few years back promoted false positives, which is
Yeah.
recruiting just like innocent people, promising them a job, dressing them up as gorillas, and shooting them and saying, "Oh yeah, we're making progress in the war against the communists." So when the rescue of the girl towards the end of the movie, you feel like there's a sense like, okay, she came out of the frying pan and jumped into the fire, because as a Colombian, you know that there's the government's just like out for blood, just like they want to
Right.
end. They don't want like a peace treaty. They want to just like end the enemy. So she's rescued, but it leaves like a feeling that you're she's she's not safe yet, even though
She's getting brainwashed by another, a bigger.
Or made an example of, just
Oh.
like made an example of by the government. So there's like no real position towards the government at any point in the movie, and it's just like left up to the spectator to figure out what might have happened after.
yeah, it's you finish the story by it just like leaves you on
Yeah.
on pause towards the end. It's an open ending.
Yeah, that's what I liked about it, because it doesn't necessarily need to be like from Colombia. It could probably go to any third world country where this is happening, and a lot of people could sort of relate to that. I'm sure there are places in the Philippines or in Africa or something that this happens all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It actually reminded me of that book, Lord of the Flies.
Yeah. It has that component to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I guess. So Monos, yeah, see it.
Recommended.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
maybe towards finishing our podcast, give us 10 films that we should see during the quarantine?
Jeez, you're putting me on the spot.
Irishman is one, right?
Okay, I guess a movie that came out this year that I really enjoyed. I actually really enjoyed the remake of The Invisible Man. I thought that was
Invisible
pretty
Man. Okay.
good. If you want to see something that's a documentary, I'm actually currently watching the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN about the Bulls and kind of like one of the big rock star teams in sports.
There's a new episode today, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Actually, it's probably right now. It's 7:30. So.
That was the legendary Chicago Bulls. The one.
Oh, dude. As big of as a Laker fan I was still a big Michael Jordan fan.
I think everyone was.
To kind of see these old clips are pretty cool.
Definitely.
There's another great film that I guess when we're talking about quarantine or films that are very low budget and could be done with not too many big characters. There's a movie called Detour by Edgar G. Ulmer. It came out in the 40s, and it's a really good movie. And it's free. It's like one of the culturally significant films in the U.S. It's only an hour and 10 minutes. They had a really good Blu-ray of it. I recommend that movie. In fact, it's like I think I recommend it for if you just wanted to make movies because it's such a simple movie and it's so well made. It's called Detour. Yeah. What else am I watching? I got this John Cassavetes set. There's like 5 movies. They're pretty interesting. And as we were talking about, a lot of the scenes take place in one location. And it's very... it definitely reminds me of the kind of films that Martin Scorsese was making when he was younger. I recommend The Irishman. It's on Netflix. You should check it out. And I know Criterion's doing an Irishman that should be coming out later this fall. I know Marriage Story is coming out in July, so I think we should get The Irishman later this fall, which is kind of nice because as much as I'm a fan of what's going on with streaming, I still love having physical media. There's nothing quite like getting the physical media and plugging it into your Blu-ray player and then being able to watch it from start to finish.
And the commentaries and all that extra stuff.
Yeah, the commentaries it's terrific. And then I saw Mulholland Drive again. I really like that one, the David Lynch movie, and Lost Highway. I think you guys should see that. I think anyone should see that back to back. And then there's another one I saw that I really enjoyed. I like there's a lot of Korean films that I really like, but there's this Korean movie on Netflix called Burning. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see
I
it.
haven't checked it out yet.
Really good.
I saw the Train to Busan. That was crazy.
Yeah, I heard that one. The zombie
really
one.
Good.
But there's this called Burning, and it has if you like Parasite, Burning has a lot of the similar themes of Parasite, but Burning is more of a very it's like Parasite in a slower paced, and it's not so much it's like a very what's the word? It's a very thematic film, but wrapped up in a murder mystery. And I thought it was really interesting because you don't see a movie set in the present day that deals with those kinds of themes now, like this movie. I really enjoyed Burning. And then just recently I started watching The Simpsons. I hadn't seen them in I want to say decades, but the first 8 seasons are so good. I forget how funny these guys are, and the writing is actually really good. And I learned a lot from The Simpsons from the writing. I think the comedy is really good, and I think that's 10.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's more than 10.
That's good. That's a great list. So
Yeah.
everybody listening, please subscribe to Nerdopolitan. We're talking to people that know their shit, know about stuff, different interesting conversations.
Yeah.
Today we had Matt Oquendo. Later we're gonna post a link to Matt Oquendo's work. We had the privilege of working with Matt Oquendo on LA Metro Project, and we're also gonna post his blog where he writes about films. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for this.
Cool, everybody. See you next
Bye,
time.
everybody. So we're still.